If you're so comfortable lying on national television, lying to Diane Sawyer, arguably one of the greatest women of all time, truth tellers of all time, I just think, what else are you capable of? Well. We are back together again. We're here to record part 2 of our Scott Peterson deep dive.
Do you ever feel like with the wells, you kind of rush through them? And I feel like I take my time. I really luxuriate in each syllable. Like, well, welcome back to the show.
I mean, if you ask, I'm going to give you an answer, but I think that it sounds a little bit more contrived when it's drawn out.
Are you trying to make a statement about my entire personality?
No, just about this.
Okay. Well, Chandler. We are back for part 2 of this deep dive on the disappearance and death of Laci Peterson. Somber, sober stuff. Before we get to it, though, how are you?
I am good. I'm actually a couple degrees short of good, I would say. I'm pretty overwhelmed this week. I have a lot going on, a lot to do. Those days where maybe this never happens to you, but I feel like I cleaned my kitchen 8 times yesterday.
You know what's funny about that? I cleaned it twice yesterday, but I did resent the second time.
Yeah. I think I cleaned it no less than 4 and no more than 8. I had several things to make. A lot of this is my own doing because I'm on a bread journey right now, which I'll spare everyone because it's probably very boring to listen to. But yeah, I was cleaning all day long, and then there's laundry. And I think I just had one of those days where I was like, wow, living in New York is really hard when you have a really fucking small apartment. Excuse my French.
I mean, well, the thing about a wash and fold, though, is it's kind of nice because you just drop it all off at one point. They wash all of it and you pick it up folded. And they're like, it's basically across the street from you, right? So it's kind of like.
Thank you for invalidating what I experienced because you're a person with a washer and dryer in your house, in your apartment. No, it's definitely nice because you don't have to do all of the laundry.
You don't have to switch the loads. You don't have to keep on top of it.
I mean, I have nice clothes. This is something you can't relate to, but I have a lot of hang dry things, and I can't do hang dry with wash and fold. So there is still a switching it out, picking up the laundry, hanging it up, and also just putting stuff away is hard, especially when your drawers are already all so full.
Yeah, well, I think you need more space, and I think you need more staff. It's really as simple as that.
I certainly need more space. I'm feeling just I'm packed to the gills with clothes and stuff I don't need, and I've also got a packed schedule. So with that, should we get into it?
Let's get into it, Chan. Okay, so I kind of led us through the first part of this, through Laci's disappearance, the discovery of Scott's mistress, Amber Frey, who did not know that she was the mistress, by the way, so we don't want to malign Amber's character. And Chan, you're going to take us through the rest of the facts of the case, and hopefully we can reach a verdict, you, me, our listeners, on what exactly happened.
I mean, I don't think that... I don't even need to deliberate. I'll just tell you that.
Okay. He's innocent.
Yes.
And you're writing him letters.
He should be freed. He's going to officiate our wedding from jail.
I think you could secretly be a Scott Peterson groupie. And, you could potentially be hoping for a wedding to someone else.
Absolutely not.
Rather than Benjamin.
All the information, all the facts of the case are very fresh in my mind. And this man is revolting. And he should be, I think, actually burned at the stake. But that's just me.
I agree. Can I just say, though, it's very upsetting because I'm watching the Peacock documentary. This man has been in prison since the prime of his life, right? Since late 20s for 20 years. So now he's approaching 50. And he still has what looks to be ostensibly a pretty solid head of hair. And he's still pretty hot. He legit is aging well. And it's just very frustrating. I feel as a woman, as just a member of society, it's very frustrating that he was dealt such a good hand of good looks.
Yeah, I completely agree. What God would do that. Also,
so true.
Also, a lot of men, I think, have prison glow-ups.
Oh, because he's doing a lot of working out.
Well, there's just nothing to do, I think, but work out.
There's probably very little sun exposure, too.
But this is not about Scott. This is not about Scott, although this, deep dive does center around Scott. We're talking about Laci's disappearance and murder. So let's now talk about what Scott told Diane Sawyer about Amber after she had come forward to the press and to the police.
Okay.
I was introduced to him. I was told he was unmarried.
Amber Frey came forward.
I'm glad she did.
You are?
Definitely.
Why?
It's the appropriate thing to do. And it really shows what a person of character she is, and it allows us to get back looking for Laci.
Did you tell her that you were not married?
I did. And then when Laci disappeared, I called her, and admittedly it wasn't immediately. It was a couple days after Laci's disappearance that I telephoned her and told her the truth.
The truth?
That I was married, that Laci disappeared. She didn't know about it at that point. And then she contacted the police.
Okay, so let's just take a second and talk about the fact that Scott said that he had told Amber everything, that he had kept her up to speed, or that he had told her that his wife was missing, and the fact that that's just a full lie. He just fully lied to Diane Sawyer about it.
Oh, yeah. Full sociopath. Just calling Amber 18 minutes before Laci's vigil and saying, you know, bonjour, I'm in front of the Eiffel Tower.
It's not even like lying by omission. I mean, it is, but it's like, it's a full other tall tale that he's telling her.
Well, and can I tell you something I was thinking about last night after we had wrapped part 1?
Yeah.
I was thinking about how he said to Amber, I think it was on December 8th or 9th, so a few weeks before the disappearance, I lost my wife. So let's say he is falling in love with Amber, does want a future with her. Is he just sowing the seeds that, like, is he already plotting Laci's death, telling Amber that she died, and just like hoping Amber doesn't, you know, put the puzzle pieces together and figure this out? Like, why would you tell that to someone that you had lost your wife if it could ever be possible that you guys were just going to get a divorce, right?
No, he was not thinking this through at all, or what he thought he was doing wasn't smart, because it doesn't really add up. Especially, I think, watching him lie to Diane Sawyer about this. He also goes on, so I'll actually play this, but he also goes on to tell her another lie. And I am not on a jury panel, and so I can be a little bit rash with my conclusions. But I just think if you're so comfortable lying on national television, lying to Diane Sawyer, arguably one of the greatest women of all time, you know, truth tellers of all time, I just think, what else are you capable of? And, you know, this is while he's in the hot seat. I can't reconcile a world where he does lie about some things, but he's totally innocent here, or he totally didn't kill her.
Completely.
And their son. Okay, so let me play this part.
Were you in love with her?
No.
Was this the first time? Are there others out there?
No.
There's no one else who can come forward?
No. I owe a tremendous apology to everyone.
Had you told anyone? Did you tell police?
Told the police immediately.
When?
That was the first night we were together. The police, I spent with the police.
You told them about her?
Yeah, from December 24th on.
That wasn't true, and Scott Peterson called us after the interview to set the record straight. He said he never told the police about his affair with Amber Frey, but claims he did tell his wife.
So he says on TV that, yes, he told the police from the get-go that he was having an affair. Then he calls Diane Sawyer, calls ABC, and he's like, actually, that's not true. But you know what is true? Laci knew about it. And it gets even more crazy.
Credulity strainer?
Yeah, credulity. My credulity gets even more strained. You know, it's about to like collapse under all this. What we'll hear as we listen on in this clip just doesn't make any sense. And he basically says that, you know, he told Laci, but she wasn't angry. And Diane really presses him on this. And it's kind of amazing.
I'm sorry. This is no laughing matter, but this guy is so laughable in some of his shenanigans.
I mean, this guy is just clearly not a woman. The idea that you could be like, yeah, I told my 8-month pregnant wife about my affair, but, you know, she wasn't angry and our marriage was glorious. So listen to this.
Did your wife find out about it?
I told my wife.
When?
In early December.
Did it cause a rupture in the marriage?
It was not a positive, obviously. It's you know, inappropriate. But it was not something that we weren't dealing with.
A lot of arguing?
No. I you know, I can't say that that even, she was okay with the idea. But it wasn't anything that would break us apart.
There wasn't a lot of anger?
No.
Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has had an affair and is saintly and casual about it? Accommodating? Makes a peace with it?
Well, you don't know. No one knows our relationship but us.
Yeah. And I just love Diane just being like, so you really believe, like, you really expect people to believe, and maybe I just haven't seen a lot of her interviews in a while, but she does not hold back. There is no like, oh, we got this guy in the hot seat, let's go easy on him. I just love it.
I will say there's always a tenderness to the tilt of the head.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
And between the bob, there is a piercing gaze, Chandler. And I feel like she always kind of asks the questions that all of us are asking at home, okay? And she points out the true stupidity to this tale because there's no woman in history, let alone an 8 months pregnant woman, who finds out about her husband's infidelity and is just like, oh, kumbaya, live and let live.
Completely. Or who, it wasn't going to break us apart. I think that he's trying to do a good job of like, not making it seem so out of character, but nobody's buying this.
Also, I'm sorry, Laci, she finds out this earth-shattering information and she just keeps it to herself. She doesn't confide in a single friend. I mean, her parent, her mom, her father, something bad happens to me, the first thing I'm doing is calling you, Courtney,
right.
Mom, Dad, someone in my life.
Right.
Generally 2 people, and swearing them to secrecy. And then the first thing they do, if it's huge, is they call someone else and swear them to secrecy to share the load, to share the burden.
Exactly, to share the burden. No, I think that's a great point that, she hadn't told any of her other friends or close people in her life about it. I think also Scott wants to have his cake and eat it too, where he wants to be the good guy for, coming clean to his wife because it was the right thing to do. And also wants to have it look like their home was a peaceful home right before she disappeared. Yes, he was dropping a bomb on their marriage, but, it wasn't anything they weren't going to work through. And no one knows their relationship with them.
It wasn't going to break them apart.
Lauren, let's take a second and talk to people about Clear Protein, our latest favorite from Clean Simple Eats.
Clear Protein, I kid you not, is one of the most refreshing, easy ways to get your protein in. I am obsessed. It's the best.
Is it not the most genius product?
The reason I love it is usually I'm used to drinking protein shakes, and that means I'm getting a blender messy. I'm committing to that process. Whereas with Clear Protein, I can just reach in the fridge and grab a delicious cold can of this Clear Protein drink that's ready to go.
No, it's incredible. It's made with only 8 ingredients. It's ultra filtered protein that is completely lactose free. It's easy on digestion. And each of the cans contains 20 grams of grass-fed whey protein and only the highest quality ingredients. I mean, there are just times where you don't want the heaviness of a protein shake and you just want something more crisp and on the go. And this is why I love Clear Protein. I love the tropical orange flavor.
I love the prickly pear. Truly, it's the most refreshing way to get your protein in. Go to cleansimpleeats.com and use code POPAPOLOGIST10 for 10% off your order.
Go to cleansimpleeats.com and use code POPAPOLOGIST10 at checkout for 10% off your whole order.
Well, also, Chandler, he is still doubling down, okay? And in the new Peacock documentary, in his interviews, he's saying that Amber Frey turned their relationship into a relationship, but it never was that. It was casual sex. It was just classic, the girl wanting it to be more, but it never was that to him.
It's funny that you say that because if we cut to then February 10th of 2003, so, we're in February, Laci disappeared in December. This is after Amber has come forward about the affair. Scott reaches out to Amber 3 days before her birthday to try to get her to meet up with him in person. She says no, the press is going to find them. And then on her birthday, Scott contacts Amber and lets her know that he left her a birthday gift in a hospital parking lot in Fresno. Amber says, I went to the spot that he had led me to find this. He had a package for me there for my birthday. There was a container with butterfly wildflower mix, which was significant for me. I have a thing for wildflowers and butterflies. And there was a silver box with an amber necklace, a CD of Norah Jones' Come Away With Me, a little card or a note or something that he had written on it. So, I mean, that's quite the gesture for someone you're having casual sex with.
So this is just your booty call, and you're leaving a very sentimental, thoughtful, romantic gift for her. I'm so confused. Why is he going through so much effort to keep Amber hooked on him?
Right.
If she's just purely casual sex to him.
Also, he's clearly trying to win her over and keep their flame alive. I mean, also just to be in the state of mind where you're like, yeah, like let's listen to some Norah Jones and get it on.
Come away with me and I will write you a song.
I'll just say in my dalliances as a young person, nothing casual ever happened to that song. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely not. I think that dropping off a CD for somebody, a gift, he's still trying to keep Amber in his clutches, and he still is into her. His wife and son, an unborn son, have been missing for 2 months, and he is smitten still with this other woman.
It almost makes me think that this crime, like, was this just a crime of passion where he just fell so in love with Amber? Because the idea that he is risking so much by leaving this gift for her, like, it's such a bad look. Risking getting caught leaving this gift, like risking the media finding out about it, it just makes you look so terrible. And so part of me wonders, like, was this all for his hope to spend the rest of his days with Amber Frey?
Right. Just like him being really captivated by her.
Right. Anyway.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think too, you never really see him that broken down about this in any of the interviews, which makes me feel like he's just not mentally present enough to realize what has happened or to care. And whether that's coming from a place of being really lovesick or that's just you are a sociopath and maybe you haven't always been this way, but somehow you turned it into this person. I don't know. It really makes no sense.
Laci's parents said that on the night of the disappearance, it was either before he called them or after, but he basically just like ate a bunch of pizza. He like had a big meal. Also, there was one time when he was with the police when they were searching for her, or it was sometime very early on, and they stop it in and out. And the police say they were surprised because it was right in the middle of this disappearance at the height of it. And he's like, oh yeah, I'll take a milkshake, a double-double. And you would just think that like maybe you wouldn't have an appetite. Everyone processes grief differently, but still it's just strange behavior.
Yeah, you just think that your mind would be mentally like overrun with like the worst thoughts, just assuming the worst. And I always go back to like Sherry Papini's husband, who's just like agonizing with the police.
Right, for sure.
Okay, but let's keep it moving. So Laci is obviously still missing at this point. Police were continuing to look for her, and they were also keeping a close eye on Scott and recorded his phone calls for 4 months during the whole investigation. They're doing thorough searches of their home, their property, his boat, his truck, his business warehouse, and, all the other places where he could have frequented. So police discovered a homemade anchor that Scott had made from concrete in early December. There is also a powder substance on Scott's boat and trailer that appears to be a part of this concrete mix. And so the police sort of theorized that Scott used concrete to potentially sink Laci's body. A little bit more on this concrete. So he purchased 90 pounds of concrete to make an 8-pound homemade anchor. He used some of the remaining concrete to repair a hole in his property, but there was still a lot of leftover concrete. And where was it? And the police say that Scott told them kind of conflicting stories about what happened to all this leftover concrete. He said that he'd thrown it away and he didn't really know where the rest of it was. So just a little bit more evidence that they find. So during the search of the property, search dogs alerted to Laci's scent on a blue tarp in the shed. Police theorized that Scott had used the tarp to wrap up Laci's body, put her in the trunk, put her in the marina, and dump her body. Scott obviously denies this. Something else to note here is that the tarp was covered in fertilizer, and fertilizer is sometimes used to destroy DNA. The search dogs also alerted to Laci's scent at the Berkeley Marina, which was where Scott was on, obviously, December 24th when Laci disappeared. So when I first read that part, that they caught her scent at the marina, I was just like, oh my gosh, that is huge. But I just want to say that apparently, and this comes out later on in like Scott's defense, but apparently these search dogs, or at least the search dog that was alerted to Laci's scent, was like wrong 66% of the time. So you can't really trust that information as like bulletproof.
Yeah. And also, I don't know, it just seems so crazy that these search dogs would have the capability to detect her scent in an outdoor area.
I think search dogs are often used outdoors.
Yeah. Like, I guess I'm impressed that they have those capabilities. But yeah,
right.
it seems a little iffy.
Right. Okay, so police learn more concerning information about Scott as the investigation continues. So from debt to additional extramarital affairs, so another lie to Diane. And after Laci's disappearance, Scott sold her car and also got a porn subscription, which is it's funny because it's pretty dated to say you got a porn subscription, but Scott talked to also a realtor about potentially selling their home. And, he's just kind of like, life is moving on. This says he's also obviously giving Amber gifts.
Yeah. And this is just in what is this, in the first 8 weeks that he's doing all this?
I think this is like first 2 to 3 months.
So it's like, all right, we're probably not going to see her again. So let's sell the car.
Right.
I'm not even going to talk about the subscription. But yeah, it's, he's not acting like she's coming back. Mm-hmm. It's more like we're moving on with life with no Laci.
Exactly. So Scott also is not concerned with the investigation, and he drags his feet when the police ask him for things. He refused to get Laci's dental records for the Modesto Police Department for weeks. He made excuses. He said he didn't know what the address was and he couldn't remember what the doctor's name was. But when police actually got the records, it showed that Scott and Laci went to the same dentist. I think that's pretty interesting, that he didn't want to make it easy for them to get her dental records.
That is very weird.
Yeah.
Extremely weird.
Extremely weird. So another concerning detail is that Christmas Eve 2002, so the day of her disappearance, it was the first time that Scott had actually taken his boat out on the water. He had purchased that specific boat in part due to its depth finder.
Oh, really? Okay.
And investigators kind of theorized that he could have bought this boat with the specific purpose of trying to find the best place to dump a body.
The boat thing is interesting because I've also seen, and I don't know if this is part of what you're going to share, but I've also seen that there's no way, given kind of how shaky this boat is, it's not like a huge boat. It's more like a one-person boat. There's also demonstrations where they say there's no way he could have actually, lifted her body out of it and put it into the lake without basically falling into the lake himself.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit, but physics of that or whatever kind of strain credulity as well. And also, can you imagine how heavy that is with, she, I think, weighed 153 pounds at the time of her disappearance, but also, with 2 concrete anchors, or at least 1 concrete anchor.
Oh, that's such a good point.
That's pretty heavy to lift over the side of your boat or whatever.
Yeah.
But
and remain balanced and not completely tip over.
Yeah. We're now going to talk about Laci and baby Connor's bodies being found. This is very, very sad and graphic. So if this does not serve you, please just skip ahead a couple of minutes. So on April 13th, 2003, the body of a baby was found on the shore of San Francisco Bay, 8 miles north of Berkeley Marina, which is where Scott went fishing. The umbilical cord was still attached, but it was torn. And then the very next day, the body of a severely decomposed adult washes up on the shore 1 mile from where the baby's body was found. So once again, getting into some more gruesome details. The adult body was missing the head, the arms, and most of the legs. The body also had 2 cracked ribs, but the forensic analysis couldn't determine whether the injuries to the ribs took place before or after the death. The majority of the organs were removed. Can't be determined whether violently or just from decomposition. I guess actually the uterus was still, though, intact. And DNA results would later confirm that this was Laci and the baby was Conner. And authorities were unable to determine whether Conner was born alive or dead. So that happens all in April, which I actually did not know until I read this, that the bodies had been found. I did not know that. I thought a huge part of this question mark with this case and the fact that there were still, a lot of question marks around him and potentially him being innocent was because the body was never found, or the bodies were never found.
Right. I think the rule tends to be if there's no body, there's no proven murder, right? You can't actually prove the person's dead. Yeah.
Right,
so you can't, you can't try someone for the death of someone who could have just disappeared. Wow. It could be alive somewhere.
Yeah.
So you have to have a body.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't really know what else there is to say here other than that this is so gruesome and terrible. There are no words. And it's just, it makes me think of now the videos where we watch where he's just completely lying, and what we hear about how this case goes on, in the weeks after and the days after their bodies are found, and the way he acts and the way he is acting, that this man is guilty to me.
I'm just confused though a little bit on and I didn't know about the dismemberment. So do they give any sort of details on whether he did that?
I think they don't know whether that was due to just like being in the ocean, and just like who knows what happens there. Yeah, or if it was like the intention of whoever killed her. I think one thing that people point to in this case is that it is unlikely, I guess, or the people think it is unlikely that he could have dismembered her, Scott, because he knew her, and that's obviously very hard for someone to do if you know the person, obviously, So, I mean, and I also could think that like ocean creatures.
That's what that leads me to believe as well. Also, because I just think that it would have been very hard for him to do that and not leave a ton of traces of it.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay, everyone. I've been on vacation for the last week, and we've been moving hotels or rooms every single night, and it's very hard for me to sometimes fall asleep in an unfamiliar place, which is why I love having early bird, because I can take a half an early bird and I can just like fall asleep normally like I would in the comfort of my own bed. I love early bird for all my sleeping needs.
Early Bird CBD is truly the most magical combination of 12.5 milligrams CBD and 2.5 milligrams THC. It's the gorgeous recipe that will just help you relax, and it'll give you that warm, gooey feeling that's just so nice and relaxing. I love it before a show. And also, if I'm having trouble sleeping, if I take a half an Early Bird CBD, I am knocked out in 30 minutes. It's phenomenal.
It's the best. I love having it on hand. If you're new to Early Bird, I would recommend starting with just a half, and then you can work your way up to a full gummy.
Everyone, go to earlybirdcbd.com and use code POPAPOLOGIST20 for 20% off. They ship to all 50 states, so you can get this anywhere in the US. We love Early Bird CBD, and we know you will too. These are the best gummies.
Go to earlybirdcbd.com and use code POPAPOLOGIST20 for 20% off your order. The bodies are found April 13th and April 14th, 2003. On April 18th, Scott is arrested in San Diego County pending capital murder, double homicide charges, and is held without bail. Now, when the police find Scott, he's in La Jolla. He is on a golf course with family members. His hair was bleached. He had $15,000 in cash, hundreds of sleeping pills, 10 Viagra pills, his ID, his brother's ID, a gun, a dagger, and multiple cell phones. So was he just sort of having a boys trip or a little vacay after these bodies are found? Or was he ready to flee the country?
Yeah. Was he strategically right next to the Mexico border?
Mm-hmm.
So there's an audio recording of him talking to his brother on the way to the golf course.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm not going to make it to golfing today because I don't think it's a good look for there to be pictures of me in the press golfing, because he had someone following him and he thought it was the media, but it was actually the police following him.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So they arrested him right outside Torrey Pines golf course. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just don't think that you have multiple IDs on you, weapons, and a bunch of cash if the plan isn't to get out of Dodge. It just seems strange.
Absolutely strange. Why would you need that? Why do you need multiple IDs? Exactly. Also, 5 days ago, your wife and your unborn child, like their bodies have been found. Most people would be in pieces, at this like sort of closure moment of the past couple of months.
No, that's actually such a good point. And I don't know why I didn't think of it originally, but you're right. I mean, ostensibly, if he did not do it, then his missing wife is now dead. Okay. And his son is dead. And he's just found this out,
And now it's like you're planning a funeral, or you are trying to now.
You're hitting the course?
Right. You're on a vacation.
Like you got 18 holes
and 10 Viagra pills.
Oh my gosh.
Like this man is guilty. And it's funny when I was watching the Diane Sawyer interview, because I thought like hearing that the Innocence Project had like taken it on and that just like it's been so long, I was like, well, maybe the tide of public opinion has turned and maybe people do really feel like he was wronged. But all of the comments are just like, thank you, Scott, for leaving no reasonable doubt.
Right. Absolutely.
It's just like he doesn't even make sense. You can tell he's so distracted and conflicted. He can't even keep his lies straight. Just nobody is believing him.
Right.
Which is heartening, frankly.
Absolutely. Honestly, like, and I watched the Peacock documentary and I was so floored that they even made a documentary with these like alternate theories, because the theories seem so far-fetched that any of them could be true.
Right. The theories are all extremely far-fetched, and they don't make you think like, oh, that actually really could have happened. They're all like, I guess with another crazy act of God, or just like if we live in a world where random people get kidnapped, that could have happened, but it's just like that stuff can happen, but most of the time it doesn't.
Right. Correct.
So at his arraignment, Scott pleads not guilty to 2 counts of murder with premeditation and special circumstances. I think it's interesting that he's charged with 2 felony counts of murder with premeditation, but there is still no cause of death or direct evidence linking Scott. So the prosecution must feel pretty strongly that they can convict him.
Let's just imagine, Chandler, for a second that he didn't do it. And he just happens to be the most unlucky man alive who happened to have his first affair ever a month before this all goes down, a month before his wife is kidnapped, and then her body, is dumped in the same place he happens to go fishing that day. What?
Yeah. Once again, and especially when we get to these other theories, it's just like, yeah, he was in a body of water the day she went missing, and the bodies wash up like months later.
From that same body of water.
Exactly. Like that alone is enough.
It seems like plenty to me. Yeah. And I think they were just waiting to receive, like once they found the body, they were going to arrest him. But they needed a body first.
I mean, so yeah, the bodies were found on April 13th and 14th, and April 21st is when he was arraigned. And he was arrested on the 18th. So yeah, it's just like boom, boom, boom. They were like, they were ready. Yeah. So there was a media circus obviously surrounding this trial, and efforts were made to keep the trial from being a big spectacle, but it's kind of impossible not to. But the trial was moved to San Mateo County, and they didn't allow cameras in the courtroom for trial. So the trial didn't begin though until the following year in June of 2004, and it lasted for 5 months. So I'm going to talk about the prosecution's case. Prosecutors said that his motive was to escape his marriage with Laci and impending fatherhood, and he wanted to just be with Amber. Something that does stick out to me is just that Amber is also a single mom. So it's not like Amber's just like this person with no responsibilities and can just be a wildflower in the wind.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's
listening to Nora Jones.
Yeah, I think that's always interesting to me, that it's like he was ready to be a stepdad for her, but he didn't want to be a father to his own child.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have any conclusion other than that. Just it doesn't make sense to me. So the prosecution plays audio from some of Scott's recorded calls with Amber, him reading her poetry and his big lies about being in Europe over Christmas. Laci's OBGYN testifies saying, she was not going on any of these walks. She had totally discontinued this. Her friends, her yoga teacher, her family, everyone said she was not out and about going on walks. That was not what she was doing at that point. You're 8 months pregnant. You're like, you could go into labor at any minute, kind of. You're not trying to exercise.
And as we said, her OBGYN said no more walks. Mm-hmm. We don't want to induce early labor. We want to give this baby as much time in the womb as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So a hydrologist testified during the trial, and they said that Laci and Conner's bodies would have likely been dumped in the area that Scott was fishing in to eventually wash up where they did months later. So I'm guessing they testified about currents and where the water would have taken things that were dumped there. Also, Amber testifies during the prosecution side, and she's represented by Gloria Allred. And she basically was there to just communicate to the jury that this was her experience, and this was just sort of where she fell in terms of his motive. She wasn't there to try to explain what happened or whether or not he killed her, but just this is where I was at with Scott Peterson at the time of all this. She did not fall apart during cross-examination, and she came across as a really sweet, naive girl who'd been tricked by Scott Peterson. And at the time, the media was really painting her as this homewrecker.
Right, of course.
And so I think this was she had a really powerful, sincere testimony. So getting back to this homemade cement anchor, prosecutors cited that the homemade cement anchor and blood on the bedspread and on the door of Scott's truck were all evidence of Laci's murder. They cited the fact that a cleaning service had come to the home on December 23rd, really made Scott's report of Laci mopping the floor on December 24th really unlikely. And they lean on the testimony of the neighbor who saw the dog, out and about in the neighborhood without a leash on. They said that that's evidence that, Laci was already dead, that things had already gone awry. their sort of theory for what happened was that Scott had smothered Laci on or before the day of her disappearance. After doing this, he rolled her body up in the tarp, put her in the truck, and then dumped her body in the San Francisco Bay, anchored down by several homemade cement anchors. Given the rest of Scott's day, he would have had plenty of time to clean up the crime scene. That's why there was a mop and a bucket in the home when everything was found. I know, it's like so gruesome.
Ugh. I mean, here's the thing that we're going to get to, I'm sure, other people saying they saw Laci, right? Because there are these like witnesses.
Yes.
So I guess I'll just save what I'm about to say for once we get to that. But there are some alternating accounts. But again, it's like Occam's razor. This seems the most likely to me.
Right. So I'll just say that the defense argued that Laci had been kidnapped. She'd gone on a walk, which, she was doing often at the time while 8 months pregnant, while, her doctor said not to. She was still going on a walk. And they said that the kidnappers had held her until she gave birth. And then they killed her and dumped her body in the ocean. And I presume also, the body of the baby. The defense argued that the police were just only ever focused on Scott. So, they never gave proper time to, look into these kidnappers. Obviously, they hit on the fact that the prosecution was relying completely on circumstantial evidence. They had no forensic evidence, and they disputed all of the prosecution's forensic claims. Specifically, Scott's defense team argued that if Scott had not only he and Laci on the boat, but also the cement anchor to weigh down her body, then the boat would have capsized, as the boat was actually very small, like you were saying. Literally, it looks like a wide canoe with a chair and an engine. That's interesting. It's very small.
Yeah, it is. And so it would be very difficult to ergonomically, maintain balance on this boat and also lift up her body and put it into the water.
I mean, I thought this boat was like a proper fishing boat.
No. Okay, so people, if you want to visualize this, it's like if you've been on a little like dinghy, it's like a little dinghy boat where everyone's kind of like perched, but it's very precarious. And it's like a one-man boat. I mean, I have a couple thoughts. One, who's to say he didn't fall in and then right size it and just get back wet?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible. Maybe some nautical listeners will tell me, Lauren, like the boat would not be operational after that. I don't know.
Right.
So that seems potential to me. I also kind of wonder, like, is it possible that he just little by little, like one cement block goes in and then he kind of lifts the body, and then once he just kind of lets gravity do the work?
I think it is worth noting that the defense conducted multiple attempts to reenact the alleged body dumping using the same type of boat and the same weights as Scott, Laci, and the concrete. And none of these attempts were successful because the boat capsized every time. But that's also the defense doing it. So I don't know. It's like, can you trust that? Maybe you can. So that's sort of like the physics of the boat. And, if you were to have dumped her body, we still don't really know exactly how that would have worked.
Okay.
So on November 12th, Scott was found guilty. So he was found guilty of first-degree murder for Laci's death and second-degree murder for baby Connor's death. The jury then sentences him or recommends that he be sentenced to death. And the judge follows that recommendation. And so Scott is on death row, I think, at this point.
Okay, so I looked it up quickly, and it says Scott Peterson is finally moved off California's death row. So this happened in October 2022.
Oh, wow.
So he was moved off death row 2 years after the California Supreme Court overturned his death sentence. This is so annoying. It's like a new mugshot taken Friday shows Peterson 50 with salt and pepper stubble compared to his previous clean-shaven look. The state's high court overturned that sentence in August 2020 after finding that potential jurors were improperly dismissed for saying they personally disagreed with the death penalty but would be willing to follow the law and impose it. Okay. So right now he's in prison with no possibility of parole.
Got it. Okay, so let's get into some of the issues with the jury and why people, think that there was maybe juror misconduct.
Okay.
In 2022, there was a hearing to see whether Scott would possibly have a retrial based on the concerns of juror misconduct. And this is all based on this one juror named Rochelle, who lied on her jury application, and she omitted facts about her life that could have caused her to not be able to, approach the Scott Peterson case with neutrality. So, they asked people, have you ever been a victim of a crime? And she answered no. But she was lying because she later admitted that she neglected to disclose that she had obtained a restraining order against her then boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, so her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, for stalking and threatening her by vandalizing her car and kicking her door down. At the time, she was pregnant with her second child. So Rochelle had a fight with her ex-boyfriend that then resulted in his arrest. On her restraining order, she wrote that she feared for her life and for the life of her unborn child. So basically, she was pregnant and the victim of violence. And that would obviously color her neutrality, her ability to be neutral. And basically, the defense team says that she was trying to capitalize on her position in the jury and trying to use her role for fame because she appeared on numerous shows after the case and even wrote a book about being on the jury. Additionally, she wrote Scott letters in prison after he was given the death penalty. But I don't think it was like, I'm in love with you. But she wrote to him 17 times in total. In her letter, she wrote things like, what happened that night, Scott? What pushed you to the limit where you felt like you had to kill someone who not only loved you so much, but was carrying a part of you inside of her?
Okay. I mean, so what was the outcome of this investigation? Or, because I personally think that this is unfair. That this juror who clearly has a personal vendetta, who's maybe wanting to see revenge or justice happen to someone else when she doesn't feel that it happened for her, and is clearly too invested.
Yeah.
What happened?
I don't have exactly what happened because of that trial or because of that hearing, but I do think all of this plus some other stuff I'm going to bring up culminates into, the Innocence Project taking on the case. Yeah. And they begin representing Scott Peterson in this year, January of 2024. They say that, his rights were violated and they have evidence that proves his innocence. So Scott's legal team files a petition for an appeal, and this allows his team to introduce new evidence that would allow for a retrial. And they basically allege two things: that witnesses saw Laci alive after Scott left the house the morning of December 24th, and also new key evidence.
Okay, so do you want to talk about the witnesses and what they say they saw?
I'm a little bit skeptical of these witnesses because I do think you can kind of pay people to say anything. I also think that, it's been a really long time, and I'm skeptical of people who are like, well, now I remember seeing a woman with a dog. Like, I think that memory cannot always be super reliable in that way, especially when it's been this long. So we're going to go back to the morning of December 24th, 2002.
Okay.
At least 12 neighbors reported seeing Laci walking Mackenzie the morning of December 24th. And Scott's legal team says this was really just not adequately explored in the trial. And there are 4 non-neighbors who report seeing Laci at different times and locations on December 24th. So here are those 4 examples. So the first witness didn't know Laci. He saw her walking by a gas station and noticed that she was walking with no sweater or jacket on. It was cold that morning. The second witness did know Laci and said they saw her walking on a nearby street. A third witness who did not know Laci also said they saw her walking on the same street as witness 2. That witness noted that they noticed Mackenzie the dog as his dog was the same color. So they basically were like, yeah, and I remember the dog she had because it's the same as my dog. So this is this fourth witness is also kind of a crazy scenario, but they say they saw her between 2 and 4 p.m. So not in the morning, later on in the early afternoon. They said they saw a very pregnant woman with short brown hair outside of a white van with a stripe on it. They also say that they saw her in the back of the van and that she looked very scared.
Yeah, I remember reading this little bit. And this all is a little bit confounding, okay? Because if it happens as we all think it happened, then how are all these people seeing her? I mean, it's actually one thing to me if it's just strangers saying that they saw her who have actually never who don't know her, and they think they saw a woman who resembles her. Whenever there's a case like this, there's always thousands of tips, right?
Right.
Most of them turn out to be dead ends. But I do think that it's a little bit puzzling and troubling that someone who actually knows her says they saw her. Like that's a little weird. And then that is verified by someone else who says they also saw her on that same street.
Yeah, totally. It's like it's a person who knew her and then a person who didn't know her. Yeah.
But okay, this is the other thing I'll say.
Yeah.
I was on Reddit just trying to, figure this out with everyone else. And this was interesting. Someone said, the people who saw Laci, in quotes, said she was wearing what Scott says she wore, the black pants and whatever. When she was found in light khaki pants. So
Wait, what do you mean when she was found? Like her body?
Scott said that she went missing. She was wearing like a black outfit, black pants.
Okay.
And so when people reported having seen her, that's the outfit they said she was in.
Right.
Whereas when they actually found her body, she was wearing light khaki pants. Yes.
But she was found dismembered and only with like a little bit of the legs, I think.
Okay, so it says in April of 2003, Laci's body was recovered. It was disarticulated due to decomposition. Okay, so Scott ostensibly did not dismember her. The remaining items of clothing on her body was a bra, underwear, and khaki capris.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. Again, though, it's like, I don't know. It's just very unlucky still.
Unlucky?
Unlucky for Scott that
yeah.
he just happened to go fishing where the people who kidnapped her decided that they would dispose of the body.
Right.
Just very unlucky, very strange.
Something I'm curious about, if we could have this hydrologist on the pod, is how long it would take for the body that had been arguably, sunk to the bottom of the floor of the marina, ocean, whatever, how long it would take for that to then rise or be like, what is the timeline? Because it was December to April. That's quite a long time.
My guess is that the body was, stopped being attached to those pieces of concrete, or at least parts of it.
Sure.
Due to probably some sort of like wildlife and decomposition.
Right.
Wow. So, and then once it's no longer obviously has an anchor, then it can rise to the surface.
Yeah. So another issue with all of this is or another theory, I should say, is that Laci confronted some burglars in the neighborhood. So there was a burglary sometime between December 24th and 26th across the street from the Petersons' house while their neighbor was out of town. So their neighbor was robbed during this time. And Scott's defense has the theory that after walking her dog the morning of Christmas Eve, she confronted the burglars and threatened to call the police. And then these burglars kidnapped her, killed her. And then after learning that Scott, the primary suspect, had been fishing in the bay, they then dumped her body there to frame him.
I mean, it is possible if it was widely publicized that that's where he went.
Yeah.
Then I will say there's the possibility that whoever actually did it, if it wasn't Scott, decided, okay, that's the perfect place, because it's going to frame him essentially.
Right.
It does seem highly unlikely that a woman who's 8 months pregnant, any woman at all, is going to go up to burglars and say, hey, quit it. I'm going to call the police. I don't know about you, but I tend to avoid people committing crimes, not confront them.
I would go back into my house, lock the door, and call 911.
Yeah.
Basically, there is also this alternate situation. An abandoned orange van that contained a blood-stained mattress was found near the Petersons' home on Christmas Day, 2002, so the very next day. The van had been burned, and the blood on the mattress was found to be human blood. But investigators didn't think to connect the van and the blood on the mattress to Laci's disappearance. And the defense basically says that this was the van that was maybe used for these burglaries and then her eventual kidnapping. But we don't have DNA evidence or anything from that.
One thing I think that's important to bring up is the burglars were given polygraph tests and they passed those with flying colors. And they had nothing to do with Laci's disappearance.
Yeah. So a couple more alternate theories here. A lieutenant who worked at the California Rehabilitation Institute called the Modesto police over a recorded phone call between an inmate named Sean Tenbrink and his brother Adam Tenbrink. The lieutenant who called the police told both Scott's defense and the prosecution about this call. So during trial times. In the call, he said that the brothers were talking about Laci being missing, and Adam talked about Laci walking up to them while they were taking part in a robbery, and that Stephen Wayne Todd, one of the men who was arrested for the burglary across the street from Peterson's home, had verbally threatened Laci. The Modesto police talked to Sean about this recorded phone call, and which Sean denied ever took place, despite it being recorded. And also the tape of this recorded phone call no longer exists, which is all weird. That is weird. That they're saying, weird. Hey, that these two robbers were talking about how they had encountered Laci.
Okay, yeah, that is very strange. That is very strange. I admit.
Another thing, when I first read the headline on it, I was like, come on. But this is also something that happened in that same year. Another woman who was pregnant went missing in May of 2002, so earlier, and she also washed up ashore in the San Francisco Bay. And apparently both dates mark holy days on the satanic calendar. So this is the satanic ritual thing. I mean, it's actually like the least compelling part of this to me is the calendar date, and more that another pregnant woman had gone missing and was dumped in the water.
Yeah, I mean, it's enough to bring some reasonable doubt, right? And I think, maybe there is a world where Scott Peterson just happens to be a terrible fucking husband.
Right.
And genuinely was having an affair with someone he was in love with. And he was very apathetic about Laci going missing.
Right.
And maybe he's just a really shitty person. And the culprit who actually did this did dump her body right where, it was highly publicized that he went fishing. It's really tough. Again, I think I do go back to the easiest explanation is generally the truth. But there are some troubling pieces of this for sure.
Yeah. I'm curious to see what happens with the Innocence Project taking this on.
Well, I think they're trying to get him a whole new trial. So,
okay. Well, we will see. And if they do get him a new trial, we will, of course, be covering that.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys, thank you so much for listening. Chandler, thank you for leading us through the last half of this deep dive.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it was gruesome at times, but there was a lot more to this case than I had remembered and that I even knew about. So I'm glad we were able to get into it.
I don't know. It's just so sad. Like, she was only 27.
It's so sad.
It's so sad.
Awful.
Okay, you guys, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back on Friday on Patreon. Love you, Chan. Love you, listeners.
Love you. Bye.
Bye. Blessings on your road.
Blessings on your road.
That's all for now, folks. Don't forget, give us a 5-star review, hit us up on Instagram at Popapologists, and we will see you next week, live every Wednesday.